Hi everyone, I am Nivek. So in this tutorial, we are doing the data entry RPA challenge using queues, and this is the same RPA challenge that we have done in the second tutorial, first tutorial, that is tutorial 1.0, and this is tutorial 1.1. But here we are taking the same RPA challenge, but we are doing it in the different way by using queues. And before starting this tutorial, I assume that you have a good knowledge in doing with UiPath orchestrator services. So for this uh, tutorial, we have to create two workflows. One is dispatcher and other is performer. So actually dispatcher is the one which where you know that you have known you know that RPA challenge. In this RPA challenge we have to, I'll show you the data. Let's say, yeah, this is the data we have to input into the required form fields in the RPA challenge website. And this data we have to transfer from the Excel file to the queues. Okay, for that we have to create a dispatcher workflow. And after transferring the whole data from the Excel file to the queues, next step is we have to take the data from the queues and then we have to process it. Processing it means we have to type the data into the required form field in the RPA challenge website. Hmm. So for that we have to create a dispatcher workflow and a performer workflow. So let's start by creating the first by dispatcher workflow. So for a refresh, I will show you that RPA challenge website, rpachallenge.com. Okay, so this is a website where you are doing our RPA challenge, and this is the same to work we have done in the tutorial 1.0. Okay, so first we have to make a dispatcher workflow. So just open the UiPath Studio. So click on Robotic Enterprise Framework. Actually, we are doing the dispatcher and performer both in RE framework, because you can do that dispatcher side very easily with simple workflows. But I am preferring to do with the RE framework is that because in every step, if you can learn this also in RE using RE framework, you can improve a knowledge a little bit in the RE framework. That's why I am preferring to do this dispatcher with RE framework. So just write dispatcher variable data entry. Just specify the file path. Let's say so we can save this file. Yeah, tutorial. I'm saving it in queue. Then select folder here. Just create this file. Let me check one thing also. Array framework queue. Okay. Let me transfer my challenge file here, so that the challenge Excel file here, so that this is the challenge file that we are actually from which the values are being inputted into that form fields. So take this challenge file and transfer into that the uh, dispatcher. Just save it here. Okay, just close this. Now we have opened the dispatcher workflow. Now open it. Yeah, it's open. So first of all, since we are transferring the data, that is, this is the Excel file, we are going to transferring all of this data to queue. So for transferring it to queue, we first have to create the queue. So just go to orchestrator, UiPath orchestrator. For that, you just type platform dot uipath dot com. Yeah. Now click on service. Now click on queues. Okay. So already I have created two queue earlier for my some of my works. So for creating this queue, click on this plus button. Then just give a name of queue. Let's say we can give the name as uh, data entry, and you can represent every transaction by unique reference, yes or no, but I prefer yes no here. So now maximum number of retries, because in the first tutorial I told you that whenever there is a system exception in the RE framework, automatically it will initialize it again. Similarly, in queue, if we can set the maximum retry number greater than 0, if there is a system exception occur in your workflow, it will retry it again. But for business exception, it will not retry it. Okay, so just put it 2. Okay, now click on add. So you can see that the new queue data entry is created. Okay. uh, Better I can change the name also, because I feel the name, sorry, no, can't be changed. Okay. Okay, you have created the queue. Now just go to your workflow. So at first of all, you have to know what is your transaction item. Okay, so or what is a variable type of the transaction item. So we know that what is a variable we want to transfer to queue. It is actually from the data table, means from the data table we have to transfer the data from the data table to queue. So actually in data table you can consider each row as a transaction item. Okay, so you can see each row, you can, so that is first row, it will take the first row and transfer it to queue. Then comes the second transaction, it takes the second row and transfer it to queue. Then comes the third transaction, it takes the third row, it transfers it to queue. So you can identify what is the variable type of your queue, and sorry, variable type of your transaction item. It should be a data row. Okay, so first of all you have to identify what is your transaction, because whenever you are doing any project in RI framework, first of all you have to identify what is your transaction item, etc. After that you can able to process it. Okay, so here try to change your queue item to, let's say, just take here and just type data row. Okay, so you can see system.data.data row. Click on here, just press enter. Okay, now you can see that there are some errors actually occurring due to the variable change. You can correct each one. Just go just type here. Okay, so transaction, sorry, transaction item, nothing. Okay, this is correct. Now just you can see there is another error here. So what is the error? You can check here. What's the error? You can see that your the out transaction item variable is actually a queue item, but your transaction item, which is here, it is actually a data row. So there is a mismatch between the variables, so you have to correct it. Actually I have explained this in the first tutorial itself. Okay, so just go here, click on argument, then go to queue items, you just change into data row. click it again, and then press on save. Just save it. And then after this, you can see that since we are using a data row, you don't need this get transaction item, because get transaction item transfers the data from the queue to your workflow, and this is actually required in the performer side, because we are using dispatcher just do transfer the data from the excel file. In this case, you transfer the data from the excel file to the queue. Okay, it is required in the performer side. Okay, so just disable it by right click the activity, and then just use disable. Okay, and you can mostly you can disable it rather than deleting it. Okay, so now it is correct. Just save it, close this workflow. Okay, uh, now just open the import argument. You can see when you change this variable type of out transaction item of this uh, get transaction data workflow, you can see here there is a you just type here transaction item. Okay, just type here transaction item. Okay, it is actually similar thing that you have done in the tutorial 1. If you have watched my tutorial 1.0, you can clearly identify how to do the first stage when the transaction item is a data. Okay, now there is another error mostly comes here. You just check, yeah, here is the error. Just type it again, transaction item is nothing. Sorry. Okay, okay, now it is being correct. Okay, I think in this get transaction side, the error is it is now error free. You can see. Sorry. Okay, it is now error free. Now the error is actually in the process transaction. Okay, so what's the error here? First, due to the I told you that the in transaction item argument in the invoke process workflow has a variable type q item, and it is actually transferring the data from the transaction item present in the main variable workflow. So since we know that we have changed the transaction item variable type to data row, and so there is a mismatch between the variable type, so we have to correct it. So just open the workflow. Okay, so after opening the workflow, now you change into, let's say, data row. Okay, after changing to data row, just press save, and then yeah, again open it and type transaction item. It's corrected. Now error is still existing. You can see business rule exception. No, yeah, in final status, because yeah, just open it. Okay, just open, because here since we have defined everything in queue mode, so we have to change it. Just disable this activity by pressing ctrl plus d, so the activity is being disabled. Okay, now it is corrected. Now go back and do it for business exception also. Yeah, because just press ctrl plus d. You can either right click and select control disable activity, or you can use shortcut control plus d for disabling the activity. Okay, now you go to system exception. You can disable this also you can disable this. Okay, so you have disabled the both. Okay, so now I think everything is now error free. Yeah, still there is an error exist. I think you can check here, the error existing. Okay, it is corrected. Okay, just allow me to go the error. Oh, oh, sorry, I haven't changed this queue item. Sorry. Uh, just open it. Yeah, just change it to queue item. Sorry, data row. Okay, now it is correct. Okay, now it is correct. Okay, okay. So I think we have rectified all the errors in the workflow due to the change in the variable type of transaction item. So next step is we have to initialize. Actually, in initialization stage, we didn't. It is actually optional because we didn't have to do much in initialization stage itself. We can just go to initialization. I think there is nothing we can do in initialization because only thing is we can open the because we have to transfer the data from the Excel file to the queue because there is no application that is need to be opened. Because Excel is actually opened and read data in read using read range activity etc. So actually you can avoid this. Okay, because you don't think that when you are avoiding this because we didn't open any application it occurs system exception. No problem, because if there is no application itself it can consider successful. System exception only occur whenever the application it is trying to open has certain problem. Okay, so there is no application to be opened, so you can just leave that. Now main section where we have to concentrate here is the get transaction data. So just go to the get a transaction data workflow and just open this workflow. Okay, so now in this get transaction data we have to specify the transaction item. So we know that just open the workflow. um, I think yeah, it's here. This is my data. So you can see that you have to specify in the get data transaction workflow. We have to specify the transaction item. We know that the transaction item is actually each row of data, and each row of data has to be transferred to queue. Okay, so you have to do the same thing that we have done in the first tutorial. So just go to uh, first you have to specify the condition, that is uh, just use if condition. If here just type since argument, just take the argument for in transaction number. Okay, in transaction number to string dot equals, let's say 1, because we know that in the if you go to the transaction number, the transaction number always starts with 1. So transaction number 1 means it is a first transaction. So in first transaction, what is the main agenda? We have to read this we have to read the R this Excel file, okay, and convert into data form. Okay, so now you can just go to read range, select the read range from the workflow. Okay, now we have to specify the workflow path. Before that we have to make some changes in the Excel file config file. Okay, so we know that first we have to specify the, let's say, the Excel file we are using. For example, let's say just represent the file name challenge file. Now specify the path of the file. Just go to your website and specify the challenge path, the value section. Challenge name, I think file name is challenge. So challenge.xlx. Okay, so challenge file name. Now you have to specify the name of queue because we are transferring the data to the queue. So the queue name is, I think, data entry. So specify the name of queue here also. Okay, so sorry, data entry. Just click OK. Okay, now because we know that in dispatcher we have to transfer the data from the data table to the queue. So we have to specify the name of queue here. That is why I specify the name of queue here in the value section. Okay, now just go to constant and you have to specify the maximum retry number. You know that it is a data table format because transaction item is a data table. It's work on data table. So we have to specify the maximum retry number greater than 0. Because since you are working with queues but you are not completely entirely taking your data from the queue and processing it. Here you are actually taking the data from the excel file and transfer to the queue. So it is actually commonly to the first case that we have done. That is the first tutorial, that is tutorial 1.0. So the data transaction item is actually not a queue item. If it was a queue item, you don't have to specify the maximum retry number. Okay, but here since it is not a queue item, you have to specify it because that I will tell you when we will do in the performance section, because there you can understand the difference. Okay, so maximum retry number you can specify 2, you can specify 1 also, but mostly I specify 2. Okay, so just click on save. So we have specified the file path, I think challenge file. Okay, just copy this name so that it will be easy for me to take the data with. Okay, so just specify the workflow path. So workflow path is just a dictionary name is in config. So just take the name and in config specify the challenge file, and we know that the value of this dictionary is an object. Okay, since key is a string, value is an object, so we have to convert to string. Just use dot to string. Okay, now just what is the just check whether the sheet name sheet name is sheet 1 itself. Okay, no problem. Now read range, since we are reading the data, just specify it as simply like this so that it can read the whole data. Okay, so just give the name, that is reading the excel file. Okay, now what are you doing here? Read excel file. You can give because it's better, you can give description. Okay, so just give the output data table. Since we know that in RI framework we have a given data table within this workflow itself, this input output transaction data. Okay, so we have specified the data table here also. So after this uh, we have to specify the transaction item. We know that here the transaction item is each data row is considered as the transaction item, so we have to specify it. Okay, and actually this condition that we have done here, it means that whenever the transaction of whenever a first transaction occur, we have to read the data file. For other transaction it is not necessary to read the data file. Okay, So just we can specify, or we can we can say we can take the, or we can assign the transaction data, okay, to the transaction item. For that, here transaction data, what I mean here is each row of, here for example, it represent each row, okay. So just remember that also. So now you specify if condition. So in if condition, specifying, just name it as specifying the transaction item, okay. Now you have to specify the condition. What is the condition? What will be the condition? Condition will be when the transaction number is less than the number of rows or number of data present in the Excel file, we can specify the transaction item. Otherwise, if the transaction item is greater than the, oh sorry, transaction number is greater than this row number, then we can't specify a transaction item, we can specify it as nothing, because here there are around 10 datas, okay. If the transaction number becomes 11, then we can assign the transaction item as nothing. Now you just specify the condition, transaction in transaction number is less than or equal to input output transaction data dot rows dot count, okay. You will take the row count, then you have to specify, you have to use two assign conditions. Just take the assign tag here. First assign condition is assign transaction item, okay. So condition is, sorry, out transaction item is equal to input output transaction data, and write as uh, in transaction number minus 1, sorry, in transaction number minus, okay. So in this section we are specifying the each row of data for this case, okay. Okay, now if the transaction number is greater, you have to specify the transaction item equal to nothing, means there is no transaction data, so the process is actually completed. So you can specify transaction item is equal to nothing, okay. Just specify here, just specify assign nothing to transaction item, okay. So we have specify the transaction item. So since after specifying the transaction item, the next process you have to process the data. Here processing the data means you want to transfer each transaction item to the queue, okay. So for that, open the process state, then open process file, and here what the step here he has to do is, you have to take each row, that is, since we know that these are each transaction data, and each transaction data has to be transferred to queue, and that process we are doing in the process workflow, okay. So for that, just just draw a sequence here, and the name of sequence is transferring data to queue, Okay, so you are transferring the data to queue. Now for that, what we have to do here is uh, we can specify add queue item. Okay, so for adding the queue item, you have to specify that the certain data has to be filled here. So first is queue name. So queue name, you know that already you have specified the queue name in the, yeah, in the dictionary. You have specified the queue name data entry, so no need to specify the as data entry itself. Just you can use the dictionary method to access the orchestrator name. Okay, now just go to in config, specify transaction item. And since we know that the value of this dictionary is an object, you have to specify, you have to convert into a string, dot to string. Okay, now we know that here transferring the data to from the this from in this case from this excel file to the queue. You know that you have to specify the in the collection side, you have to specify the data to be transmitted, etc. Means I'll tell you an example. You take this queue. Okay, it's view its details. Sorry, it's closed. Just go to view again. Okay, check here. Yeah, you can see that we are specifying some data here. Let's say invoice number, vendor tax id, invoice item. And this is not the queue that we are going to from which we are going to transfer data, but this is a sample queue that I have created during my some of my automation works. So you can see you have to specify the name, this. You can't directly use this queue item to transfer your workflow. So you transfer your transaction data. You have to specify the like the name of the argument, etc. here. So for that, you can just name here. So take a challenge. So first name, last name, company name, role in company, everything you have to specify here. I think you have a good knowledge in queues, uh, so that you can easily understand all this. First name, then just specify from which, you know that first name is actually the name that is given to a particular data in that queue. So from where we are getting this first name, we can get the first name from the transaction item. So just specify transaction item here. Let's say in transaction item, uh, just use the column index method to transfer the data. So this is a zeroth column, this is the first, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is fifth, this is sixth column. So this is zeroth column index. So just specify here as, let's say, 0 dot to string. Next, last name. Now just specify here as in transaction item, let's say 1 dot to string. Next, I think we can specify company name. Company name. Now you specify the in transaction item 2 to string. Now you can just use role in company. Role in company in transaction item Right to string, because I am doing it in order wise. That's why I am not looking it again and again. Next is address. Address in transaction item, say 4 dot to string. Okay. Next is I think address email in transaction item, say 5 dot to string. Next I think phone number. Phone number in transaction item 6 dot to string. So here specify the corrections and the data, like this first name is transferred to the variable first name like this. You have specified it in the queue, in the add queue item section. So I think you have specified everything. Uh, actually your workflow is completed, means dispatcher side is completed. Okay, it is actually very simple. So just I give you a basic overview what we have done. So mostly the initial, since we have no applications here, since our main agenda is to transfer the data from this excel file to queue, so we are not using this initialization state, means to opening any applications. Okay, now in get transaction data, we have done what we have done. We have just specified this transaction item. I think you have specified, first we have read the excel file when the transaction number is 1, then after that we have specified the transaction item, okay, based on condition. And after all this process, we have go to process transaction item. In process transaction, what we have done, we have just transfer this data, means that get transaction, means the transaction item to the queue by using add queue item activity. Okay, and we have specified the queue name here, also collection of item that has to be transferred to the queue, because to transfer the data that we have, because this transaction item is each row of data, and each row of data mostly contain different, let's say here it contain different columns, and to transfer each every column, because we require every column, we have to specify that in the collection. Okay, so this is what we have done. So just we can run this process. Just close this file. Okay, so close this file. Okay. Mm, before doing with whenever you are doing any activity with UiPath orchestrator, check whether your UiPath robot, that is UiPath assistant, is connected to orchestrator or not before doing that. Okay, stop on settings, orchestrator settings. Okay, it is connected, already it is connected. Just check whenever you are doing any activity regarding related to this orchestrator, try to check. Okay, now run this workflow. It's working. Yeah, it is completed. So every transaction is successful. You can say transaction 1 is successful to 10 is successful. Okay, so just you can check in the queue section the data has received or not. Just refresh it. Yeah, transaction has been received, and you can check here. Just click here and go to view details. We can see, because we have specified the collection. In the collection section we have specified the first name, last name, company name, everything. That is actually used for representing this. Let's say if you hadn't done anything, for example, just go to the queue section, or just open from here itself. If you hadn't specified, for example, in the collections, because in the collection you have specified the name, first name, last name, etc., and that is actually had been appeared here: first name, last name, company name, role in company, etc. So what you have understand is that even you have a translation item, a row of item. If you, for example, for your activity, consider you don't need the first name. You can delete this first name and remove it, and you can transfer the data. Okay, so by using collection activity you can do like that. Okay, so whenever you are that is one advantage. If you didn't provide any value, then no data will be transferred to the queue item. Means you can't see any data, you can see data will be null. Okay, so whenever you are working with queue item transfer data, you should transfer using collection activity. Okay, I think you know all this, because since I assume that you have a good knowledge in UiPath orchestrator, etc. But just I refresh it. Okay, so we have done in the dispatcher side. Okay, so this is actually how a dispatcher works, and you have understand that a dispatcher is actually a workflow, because it is actually a workflow which is used to transfer the data from the let's say in this case we are transferring data from the Excel file to the queue. Okay, uh, or otherwise you can use, for example, you can use a file system, and you can transfer some of its data to the to the queue. You can do also like that also, but that we'll do in the later works or later tutorials, etc. We can come with that type of things. So I think you have understood actually how a dispatcher works. And now you have say, I told you earlier that you can do it in very simple method by using a simple sequence method, etc. But you can just use a simple Excel activity, and you use for each row activity, and then you can transfer each data or each row into the queue item. Very easier step, but I am not preferring that, because try to try to do this dispatcher method in this method in the RE framework itself. I told you that by using this technique, or because try to make everything to learn this RE framework, try to convert every project that you can do into RE framework if possible, because then you can have a you can improve your knowledge on working with this RE framework, etc. So now we have completed a dispatcher section, means we have transferred the data from the Excel file to the queue. So next step, we have to create a performance section. So in the performance section, what is done? Performance section, we are let's take the RPA challenge. Yeah, from performance section, we are doing here is that we are taking the each data. Okay, each data from the queue, this each data from queue, and we are inputting into the required field that we have done in the first tutorial. Okay, so whenever these each items in this queue are processed, they become transaction, because after processing it become a transaction like that. Okay, and working with the queue in the performance section have a lot of changes, comparing with that what we have done in the first tutorial, etc., that I will explain in the while we are studying about performance section. Okay, so the dispatcher section is okay. So after creating dispatcher section, we have to create the performance section. So now we can create the perform workflow. Just open the UiPath Studio again. Just open the UiPath workflow again. Okay. Thing open. So actually, it's a very simple step while we are doing with this method. Actually, so this I think first create another workflow using Robotic Enterprise Framework. Here we are creating a performer. Okay, performer. Name it as let's say data entry. Data entry. Okay, so just open this workflow. Okay, so this is the real workflow we are going to work on this. Okay, so actually this is similar to what we have done the whole in the tutorial 1.0, but difference is that we are not using data table here, we are directly using queue here. And here I told you that we are using a queue here. Means since we know that the transaction item is actually a queue item already defined, it is actually it is default, it is defined as queue item. So do you have to change the variable scope? No, there is no need for changing the variable scope or variable type of the transaction item because we know that it is a queue item, so there is no need to be changed. And so that step we can avoid here. And another step is that I will tell you when we are doing with config file. It is related to the maximum retry number. Okay, so first we can go to initialization. So in initialization, what we have to do, because this is a performer side. So performer side is we have to open the website. We have to type the data into this required field. So in initialization stage, we have to open this browser. Just open the go to init application, then open this, and then after this you have to create a let's say a sequence. Just go to click create a sequence here, and then use open browser activity. Okay, so in open browser activity you have to specify the name of the URL, but I am actually specifying it using let's say config file. We can directly specify here, but I always prefer to use in the config file itself because it's a good practice. So just specify a name for it. Let's say RPA challenge website, and the value section add the URL of this RPA challenge and copy it. Sorry, in the config file you have to specify that. Sorry. Okay, you have specified it, and now we know that we are using our queue, so we have to specify the name of queue here. So queue name is data entry. Okay, so now you just save this section. Now you go to constant section. In constant section, because in the previous tutorials and the dispatcher side we have changed the maximum retry number, but here when we are using working with queue, we don't have to change this maximum retry number. The reason is that in the queue itself, when we are creating a queue, we have specified the maximum number of retries. I can show you here itself. Just go to the queue, uh, take the data entry, and go to edit just, and you can see here that you specify the maximum number of retry already here, and this maximum number of retry actually implies that whenever our program got a system exception, for example, our system got hanged or some problem, it will retry the transaction again. But if it is a business exception, for example some missing value data etc., then it will not process the transaction again. Mostly that is what why we are specifying this maximum number of retry means. We found sometimes there are some cases where we have to run the workflow again and again. That is what is mean by the maximum number of retries. Okay, so since since already in the queue itself we have specified the maximum number of retry equal to, we don't have to specify here. Okay, so that is a major difference that we have to note when we are working with a queue item as well as with the data row. Okay, or you can say between a queue item and a non-queue item. Okay, so that you have to keep in mind. And another feature in UI while working with this queue item is that you don't have to change the variable scope. Okay, so that is another difference. That is a variable scope of the transaction item, because we are using transaction item as a queue item itself here. So now we have to open the browser, we have to specify the URL. For specifying the URL, just use in config and specify the name of the dictionary, or you can say key value, key of the dictionary. Key of the dictionary is RPA challenge website. So take this, sorry, so copy this so that it is easy for me rather than typing. That's why just specify the RPA challenge website. It is an object, the value of this is an object, so we have to convert to string. Just press dot to string. Now we have to we have opened the browser. Now most common practice is we have to maximize the window. Okay, just maximize the window itself. So maximize. Okay, and just specify here open RPA challenge website, and RPA challenge website, and you have specified, yeah, you can change the browser also here, because I always forgot this. Later when I was running the workflow, later I realized that I didn't change the workflow. So try to change the work like this browser type, because here I am using Chrome. You just specify Chrome. If you are using an Internet Explorer, you can specify that out here also. So just open the RPA challenge website. So after this you have to use a click activity, because for starting of the RPA challenge we have to press the start button. So we have to use a click activity for starting it, for clicking it. So click activity, click, submit button. So go here, yeah, click on this. Okay, the start button is clicked. So I think we have completed in the initialization stage, means opening a browser and clicking the start button. And next stage is we have to go to get transaction data. Actually we don't have to modify much in get transaction data, because the reason is that already everything is defined here, because it is a queue item, and RE framework is defaultly based on queue item. So I think you have know about the get transaction item. We know that to get the each data, that is you want let's say just take this to transaction. You know that you want each of these data. Okay, each of this data, and each of this data you can call it as a, let's say, transaction item. And to get each of this data from the queue to this workflow, you require an activity which is known as transaction item. Okay, so in the transaction item activity you have to specify the queue name. Already it is being specified here, you can see here, go frustration on. already been specified here, so no need for much into that. And this data is stored in the output is stored in the out transaction item. So there is not much modification that is required in get transaction data in case of queues. Already it is being specified. And if you want much additional details or regarding this, you can specify here. But that's optional. You can do it as well. But I am not actually doing here. And now, since get transaction data is actually already predefined, we don't have to make much changes there. We can go to process transaction there. In process transaction, it is similar to that we have done in the first tutorial, that is tutorial 1.0, where we have to type the data from this queue item to this form fields. Okay, since we know that whenever you are pressing submit every time there is a change in its field position, so we have to use anchor based activity. So just use a sequence, process sequence, like data entry. Okay, now just specify anchor base. So first you have to specify your first name, sorry, first name. And then in the anchor side you have to add the find element, because you first have to find the label. So find element, and to specify this first name, let's say here this is the first name. Okay, you have to first find the find element, first name, first name. Then after this you just type into activity, first name. So just use the input first name. So here, since we are taking the data from the queue, so we have to specify we can obtain each data, means obtaining the each data, that is first name, last name. You can't use a row like method that we have used in the data table method. Then we have to use another code for this to obtain first name, last name, company name, etc. You have to use another method, and I will explain you in this section. That's another difference when you are using a normal UI using data table and using queues. Okay, you have to look on this also. So in transaction item, to get each value from the queue, dot specific content is a code. Can specify, let's say, first name, the name of the collection, you can say, because you can see here that first name is a collection name. So last name, like that, you have to specify that name here. So you have got first name dot to string. Okay, so now use another anchor based activity, and last name, just use find element again and type into, you can use find last name and type into last name, sorry. So just sorry, uh, just go to this RPA challenge website and find last name, specify the last name, and type into last name, and here also you have to do the same thing in transaction item dot specific content. Here in the collections you have specified it as last name. Okay, forgetting the last name, so last just specify the same thing, same name as you have put in the collection side also. So just put here last last name. So just specify it as last name dot to string because it's an object. So after specifying the last name, so next I think we have to specify the we just go in order wise, that's better. uh, After last name, like company name, so just specify the company name here too. Company name I think use find element activity and find just specify company name. Okay, specify the company name here. Company name here, just find the label here and then type into the company name. So type into the company name, type into the company name, type into company name. So you have to specify in transaction item dot specific content. You can specify the company name here as company name itself. Okay, good. So just specify here company name. Since we know that it is an object, so you have to convert it to string by using dot to string format. Okay, so this is, so similarly we can do for other also. So just specify the anger base. Next is I think company name, role in company. Role in company, just specify role in company and just specify the find element here, find element and type into activity here. So find element means you have to specify the find role in company and just go to this website again and specify it, indicate on the screen role in company, just specify here and type into this role in company here, type just specify role in company and in transaction item dot specific content, just specify the name of collections, that is role in, file is named here to role in company. You have to specify the same name that you have used during the collection in adding the queue items. Okay, so it's an object, so you have to convert to dot to string. Okay, so specified here role in company and next again you have to use it for role in company. Next address, to specify the address also, so just specify address address, then you can use find element activity and specify the label address address, and then just, it is a good practice that you like you just type this, describe all these things, because otherwise a person who is looking from outside, he may not able to understand what actually have you done. Okay, so just type into type sorry type into, just indicate on the screen, address, address, address. You can specify the name itself as address, and then specify in transaction item dot specific content. Just specify the name of the collection that we are using. Use by that is address. Just copy paste, because I am tired of typing all these things again and again. That's the reason. Dot to string. Okay, so specify address. Then you can use, after specifying address, you have to specify the email. So just specify the email also. The email, just using the find element activity. Uh, just specify it again. Okay, email. Okay, specify it again also. There are some problems with the. Okay, yeah. Find element email, and after this we have to go to type into activity. We have to specify the type into, let's say, email, and then you have to indicate on screen where is the email. Yeah, here is the email. You have to specify in transaction item dot specific content. You have to specify the collection name. So collection name here it is email. So just specify the name, email, then dot to string. Okay, so yeah, specify email here also. Then after specifying email, I think after specifying email, you have to specify the phone number. So just specify the phone number also. So it's a last step, you can say. Actually doing with Q can save you a lot of time also. Phone number, find element, and just specify the phone number also here. Find element phone number. Okay, so just indicate this on the screen. After specifying it, just use type into activity. um, Type into phone number. Okay, now in transaction item dot specific content, just you can specify the phone number. Yeah. Okay, I'm using the same data from corrections because sometimes some white spacing error may have been occurring. So to prevent that, that's why I'm directly copying the data. Okay, you can also do like that also. Okay, so you have done all the, I think you have done 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 7 data you have filled. Okay, so the data entry process is completed. So next process we have to click the submit button. So clicking the submit button, submit button. Okay, so you have to click the submit button. So we'll just go to the site, because after completing all this data you have to click the submit button. So just indicate on the screen and click submit. Okay, so you can use Enterprise also if needed, but I told you that in the first tutorial that when you are submitting this data, so you have to know how much time you have taken. That is, for example, I just start with start one, the round one, round two, round three. Just need to go, and after completing all the rounds, you can see this data. So you can see this data also from here. Okay, so sorry before that I will tell you later, because I forgot to use the type into activity, like simulate type into activity means to improve its fastness. Okay, so later I can tell you, I'll tell you about that. Okay, so we have completed all the process. Now I think every process being completed, and the end process I think you can use it optional, because you can close it, but I told you that you have to see that how much time you take to complete these processes and so on. Okay, so okay, so you can see, and also we can there is no need to assign this transaction status to queue, because already in the transaction status it is being assigned. Okay, so there is no need for that also. So we can run this workflow. Just close this, save it. Okay, so let's start doing our workflow. Just close this also. So start the workflow, just run it. So it's working, I think. Yeah, it's working. So opening the website. Yeah, it's opening. Now it is going to type the data. Think some problem had been occurred. It's a problem. Oh, there's some selector problem. You can just repair it. Mhm. I think there's some selector problem. I think it will be in the. I think this is some selector problem. Actually, we can check that. Mostly, some problems may occur because whenever you are running a workflow, it is common. So click. Yeah, this is a problem. So just indicate this on the screen again. So just I think my system got some hang. Just refresh it once again. Okay. Now we can just try to, yeah. Just instead of submit you use start button. That will be much better to understand. Okay. Okay, I think everything is now correct. Now we can just close this also. Run it. It's working, I think so. Yeah, 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 it's working. Yeah, it's successfully working. So mostly whenever you are working with your RE framework or any workflow in your Excel for first time, mostly there will be an error. And actually through this error itself you can learn a lot of things. Okay, so because even though you are a beginner or an expert, learning through error can give you a lot of knowledge also. Not only in RE framework but in other works also. And also I think you have understood how initialization state works, because uh, because it was not able to identify the start button at the first time. The reason was, and mostly the system we can say it is actually in a hang state. As a result of that itself, our program was not able to identify the start button. As a result, it was a system exception, and that is as a result of system exception, it actually ended the process at the first time. Now you can see this running successfully because we have rectified that error. I think it's working. Since I hadn't used simulate act click type into activity is much lower comparing to the simulate type. I will show you when I activate the type into activity as simulate type. Then you can see how it faster. You can see the time here. You can see the time here. So we have completed the workflow and sorry process, and you can see the time here. And you can decrease the time by using simulate click activity when you are doing the workflow, or simulate type into activity in your typing section and also in clicking section to improve the fastness of typing. Okay, so we have completed the workflow successfully. So we have completed the both dispatcher and performer. So since we have processed the queues, data in the queue, they become transaction. So we can view that the state of the transaction, etc. So just go to website platform.uipath.com and just log into a UiPath orchestrator. Since I have already logged into it, so you can see my homepage is directly appeared. And now just log into the and then go to queue. You can just open your queue, that is data entry, and just view the transaction, and you can see that the status of the transaction here for each transaction. Let's say you take this transaction, view the details. You can see that this is one transaction. Okay, so you can see that this transaction is successful. Okay, and you can take the second transaction, it is successful. Third, fourth, fifth, every transaction is actually successful. So actually you can see that this transaction status is not assigned by the queue automatically. It is actually assigned by the transaction status. You can see in the process transaction very well. So just go to process transaction. In the section you can see here there is a invoke transaction status, and this actually specify the transaction status, whether the transaction has successfully processed, whether it has failed due to system exception, whether it has failed due to business exception, and so on. So you can see here that when the start you can see uh, success, either transaction item is success. You can see this is a set transaction status activity which is used to set the status of this queue item or the transaction item, whether it is successful or failure. You can see here it is successful. Okay, And if there is any error code, for example, if there is a business exception, you can just check here. Transaction status is set as business exception. Okay. If it is a, let's say, system exception, and here you can see transaction item is set as system exception. Also, we are retrying the transaction again and again. That is actually happening because when a application or a system undergoes a system exception or an automation due to certain system exception did not work, what happens, your RE framework will again like restart the system and thus able to work effectively. Okay, this is happening in the case of system exception only. Okay, but in business exception the retry is not being considered. Okay, so this is all about transaction status, and throughout this video we have completed the two workflows, dispatcher and performer. Hope you have understand all the concept related to it, and relating also to this transaction status that we have discussed now. And if you have any doubts regarding this RE framework, regarding these queues, etc., please comment in the comment box. I will reach out to that. And the solution for this I will posting in my description. You can take have a look on it. So thank you, and if you like this video, please subscribe.